Hi, I'm Ed Parcaut, your host of Inner Edison. And what I'd like you to take away from today's show is our greatest growth comes from our greatest failures. Today's guest is Devin Miller. Let's welcome him and get to know his journey, his story, and what he does. I hope it is Devin.
It is. Yep, you're
All
good.
right. It could have been Devon, or it could have been, you never.
Yeah, it's one of those where it's spelled anywhere from Devin to On to An and everything in between. And I'm just like, nope, it just is Devin like it looks. So we're good.
Yeah, see, and I usually ask, I was like, that's got to be that easy, right? And my wife's first name is Marcia, Marcia. And so ever since then, I ask questions when I take applications and everything, and they're going, well, you don't know how to spell. It's like, you don't understand. I tell my wife's name, and then they go, okay, we'll shut up. Exactly.
Oh, I'll give you one better, then we'll get going. My wife's name is, her first name is Rachel, and her middle name is Brooke, but her parents always went from Brooke. So then it even gets more complicated. Every governmental form and everything we do is Rachel, and everybody's like, I thought you were Brooke. And then it creates more hassle. I curse our parents every time we have to use their first name.
Well, there's some people who don't like their first name. They always use their middle name, right? And there's other people. So, what are you going to do? And it does come into play when you're like legal documents like I am. And I'm sure with what you're going to talk about filing, we need your legal name of if it's your actual legal name. And then people go, what? It's like for loans. It's like, okay, I don't want your full middle name on there. I only want your middle initial. Otherwise, you got to sign that whole name, which you don't normally sign. And they don't know a scribble anyway. So if you scribble, it's no big deal. All right. Yeah. So enough about life. Let's talk about other lives. All right. So you are a intellectual attorney, or how would you classify that? What?
Well, I'd be great if I was an intellectual person, but no, intellectual property. So so I do patents, so backing up, intellectual property is kind of an umbrella term that incorporates patents, trademarks, copyright. So we do a lot of that. I've been doing it for about 10 years now. I kind of have two passions. So I've done a ton of startups and small businesses. Started my first one when I was still in graduate school and been doing them since then. Everything from small family businesses up to 7 and 8 figure businesses. Been an attorney for about 10 years, started my own firm about three and a half years ago to really focus on startups and small businesses to help them on intellectual property, so patents and trademarks.
And where are you located?
Utah.
God, a lot of people are in Utah, man. Everybody's like in Utah.
It's a good place to be. Now, I wish everybody would stay out of Utah because it's getting way too expensive and crowded, but it's certainly a growing state.
But you do nationwide. It doesn't matter because it's a business law kind of thing, right?
Yeah,
so it's a federal thing, so you can do it anywhere.
Nice thing about patents and trademarks is all working with the federal government, so we can do it in any 50 states, and so I'm not limited to just a state or a small geographic location. So more of our clients are outside of Utah than inside of Utah, and we have them just about all over.
Okay. You said states. What about republics? Those other two little things that aren't necessarily a state. Do they have the same type of protection, same type of thing, or is it international at that point? I didn't think about it until you said 50
it's
states.
A fair question. I've never done it in those republics or in those territories, but yeah, they would be part of the U.S. and so technically they'd be covered. I just have never had a client that's been there or really had a need to do anything there. So, but yeah, they would be covered as well.
It wouldn't be a bad travel expense.
That's true. If I can just figure out how to get the client to pay for it, I'm there.
All right. So how did you get into this? I know you said you started your first thing in college, but were you going to college to be attorney to do this?
Yes. So to a degree. So I'll rewind the story just a little bit because it starts really at undergraduate. So undergraduate, I was studying electrical engineering. I got a second degree in Mandarin Chinese, but really my intent was to go electrical engineering. And I got to the end of undergraduate and got the degree, and I was thinking, what do I want to be when I grow up? And it's like, well, I like engineering, but I really don't want to be an engineer in the sense that I didn't want to. A typical engineer, you're a very small cog in a big wheel. It takes you decades to work your way up to the chain, get enough experience to have any real impact or say or anything of that nature. And that just didn't necessarily, that part of it didn't appeal to me. So with that, I was kind of coming out of school and saying, okay, so what do I want to do when I grow up? I really kind of had two paths that I thought sounded exciting. One was the startup entrepreneurial, do my own business type of a thing. And the other thing was the legal aspect of be able to do intellectual property, to work with a lot of inventors, help them protect and grow their business and do those type of things. So really, when I was trying to balance those, I said, well, I don't know that I really need to choose. I'll just do both. So I ended up got a double degree in both a law degree as well as an MBA or Master's of Business Administration. And that's kind of where my path started. So it was really, I went in intending to both do a startup and small business, as well as to do the law side. And that's kind of where my career's gone, as far as I always tend to split my time, or really just have 2 full-time jobs of really pursuing both passions.
So what's the other passion that you're doing, the small business? What is that? You want to talk about it or not? I mean, I know the name of your company. I know the name of your company. It's all over your hat and your shirt, so it's not like.
Hey, I'm game to talk about whatever you.
No, I want to get it. People need to understand that just because you go one way doesn't mean you can't do something else too. Absolutely. And have the same amount of time. I do multiple podcasts, radio show, and I own a mortgage company. Hello, I'm just as bad as you are. So the question is, what is that fun?
Yeah, right? So I've actually got a few businesses. I'll rather than rehearse through all of them, but unless you want me to, but I'll go with the kind of the first business that I really started, which was when I was in MBA school, and that one's still live. It's doing well. It's now a 8-figure business, and continuing to chug along. But that one started when I was in MBA school. Entered a business competition. It was one of those where they had a business competition where you come, show up, nobody knows anybody, and you form groups, and they're multidisciplinary groups. So we have designers and engineers and attorneys and MBAs or business people, and you kind of form your group, and away you go. You figure out your idea and you enter it in. So first year we came up with an idea to make gym bags less smelly. And it was kind of a fun idea, but it wasn't ever really going to go anywhere. So we entered in the competition, took second, and walked away. We were all juniors at the time, so we all had one more year. So we got back together the next year, entered in the competition again. Only this time we're saying, well, we didn't really love our idea from last year. What can we do something a little bit better? And we were coming up with brainstorming, and some of them were just crappy ideas, and they were, self-packing boxes and other things that would have never worked. But for me, I was walking home after one of our brainstorming sessions, and I was thinking, okay, what's a cool idea? And at that time, I just getting into doing some marathons. And so I'd like to run. So I just ran one of my first marathons and said, one of the things I didn't do well was I wasn't very hydrated. Didn't stop as much as I should have, didn't drink as much. And that just makes your whole experience more painful. So as I got in there, I said, wouldn't it be cool if you had a watch that could tell you your hydration level? And this was back in the days before Fitbit or Apple Watch or any of those. There wasn't wearables as a thing, but that's kind of where we started. So had the idea, pitched to the group. They liked it, went home over Christmas break, built a prototype up with my dad that's also an engineer and has some medical experience, and started testing it. Took second place again in the competition. That was bittersweet because I think we should have got first. But from that, bought out the partners and decided, hey, I'd like to do this, I think there's a lot of legs to it. Don't really, they're all going to different parts of the country. Doesn't make sense to have them all as partners. Bought them out, brought on some other people, built it up, got a full prototype, brought on an investor, got to a level where we're doing our next raise, and we came in contact with somebody else who was in the diabetes industry. They were doing more service-based, but a ton of our technology overlapped well with them. Did a merger, and that's the current company. So that is a much longer story that I condensed in there, but that was kind of the first real business. I would say real entrepreneurial endeavor. I've done a few other ones. I'm part of a content generation company. We're getting ready to roll out a legal services company that's on the DIY service, and a few other things. But that was really the first entree I had into doing a full-on business.
The reason I wanted you to talk about it is because people need to understand that you understand business, right?
Yeah, and that's what
you're not just a attorney who files things, but you understand their passion, what they're trying to do, because you've been through it. And I just wanted them to hear that, so they understood where you're coming from. That if they come to you and they have questions, you know exactly what they're feeling because you've been through it.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. And that's one thing I at least think is a worthwhile thing, and it gives me the ability to tackle or give advice and strategy from a different perspective. Because usually when you go into an attorney, they can give some great legal advice, and they are terrible on the business advice. Most of the time I say don't go into an attorney if you're looking for how to grow your business or business advice, because they've never done it. most attorneys, they're very specialized in the law, and they know how the legal aspects of it. But as far as what is marketing, what is sales, how do you do product development, how do you do hiring, how do you do no idea on any of those, but they can tell you the law. But you're missing a lot of perspective. What is it like when you're trying to balance, hey, I've got so much of a budget, I can either make payroll, I can do product development, I can do marketing, or I can do intellectual property. And how do you start to balance that? If you don't have that business perspective, you've never been through it, then you're not going to be able to really relate or give them the best piece of advice. And so I definitely agree that having that business background adds a lot of value.
All right. So what you just said, I want to go right there. All right. So that sounds like a startup, right? Someone's trying to start they started a business. They have an idea. They have people, they're whatever. What do I do? So let's go through that scenario, because a lot of people are going to be there. How do I protect it? What do I do? How do I protect it? Or so you want to go through the process?
Yeah, absolutely.
You set yourself up for me to ask this question. You know that you probably practiced this beforehand.
I didn't script anything, but I'm just that good. No, just kidding.
No, it's what I do is I see what's there and I grab it, and that's what I want to talk about. Okay.
No, absolutely. No, happy to chat about it. So I would do just a quick level set because it kind of sets the stage for what is a patent, trademark, copyright. Because sometimes people don't, if you're new to business, you haven't gone through it before, it's a bit of a mystery. I don't blame people. It's a bit complicated. But the easiest way for me to think about it is a patent is basically for an invention, something that does something, has a functionality, has a utility to it. If it does something, it goes under an invention, or it goes under patent. And that can be software, electrical, hardware. It can be even food. It can be chemistry. It can be any of those, but it does something. That's a patent. Trademark is going to be more for branding. So if you think name of a company, name of a business, name of a product, a logo, a catchphrase, those are all branding, all fall under trademarks. Last one is going to be under copyrights. And that one's more on the creative side. So if you're writing a book, you do videos, you do podcasts, you do pictures, sculptures, paintings, any of those, all of the kind of creative nature falls under copyright. And so to your question, the reason I said that stage is you have to figure out what your business is, what the core of your business is, or what makes your business money, right? And because if you're a restaurant, you don't really do a lot of it. Typically don't do a lot of inventing. Sometimes there are exceptions, but most of the time you have a really strong brand. You're trying to build a reputation, you have good food, and that's where your brand is. On the other hand, if you're making the world's next best, technology, next best iPhone or smartphone or anything else, then you're really a technology company. And so as far as when I look at the process, before you even jump into, hey, how do I get a patent? How do I get a trademark? How do I get a copyright? Is first, hey, let's step back and identify what is your business? What is the core of it? What is the value of it? And then let's work to protect it. So that's usually kind of where you start.
Okay. I want to come back to this, but you brought up about protecting, you said podcasts, right? Mm-hmm. Under copyright. So when would you want to protect your podcast under copyright? Because you'd want to protect the name under a trademark, right?
Yep, exactly. So generally, for a podcast, taking that as an example, so you can protect it, whether it's video, audio, or a combination of video and audio together, which is just really video, is you can protect that as filing a copyright. Now, where I would step back is, podcasts, generally, if you're doing a weekly episode, a monthly episode, a daily episode, that's a lot of content. You're probably not going to want to copy or continually have to file copyrights on every episode. But I'll give you the exception unless. Give you an example. So I love podcasts. My son loves podcasts. One of our favorite ones is called Business Wars. It's a more popular one. Takes head-to-head business competition. Businesses are competing for the same field head-to-head. We love to listen to it. They have per episode, I'm sure tens, if not or hundreds or thousands or millions of listeners every single episode. That is valuable to them. In other words, there is a high degree of, by the time they do marketing, they have advertising, everything else, each episode is worthwhile. So they are protecting, or they could protect a copyright with each episode, such that if they put it in, I know they've also done digital book formats. They've done, taking it as a written book format. And so they're copywriting all that because it creates a lot of value. If on the other hand, you're saying, hey, yes, we do a daily, weekly, monthly podcast, but any given episode isn't going to have that really value. It's really the brand of all the series combined that we are consistently releasing good content. But if somebody were to come along and, worst case scenario, rip off one of the episodes, it's not going to really harm our business. It's not going to really have a big impact. then you're probably not going to get a copyright. So that's kind of how you would start to delineate it is, hey, if it is a valuable, like if it is a one that's downloaded tens or millions of times, or if it's on YouTube and gets millions of views, it's worthwhile. You're making money from that specific episode. But if it's more of the whole collection or the brand, then you wouldn't. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense to me. Basically, you got to be pretty big to worry about it, basically.
Yeah, for the copyrights. And now trademark side, that protects your whole brand. As you mentioned, I would do it much earlier on, but until you're big on the copyright side, it generally wouldn't matter unless you have one that goes viral and you have one specific episode that just catches on fire and everybody listens to it. Then you might do it a one-off on that one.
Now, there's some protection from having it out there or having the domain for a while that it says that I've had this before these other people did it, right? Or is it doesn't matter? On trademarks and patents are a different story. So just trademark. We'll just stay with trademark.
We'll do it trademarks and maybe I'll just touch on copyrights a little bit. So, I'm going to answer in reverse because copyrights are a bit
whatever.
Copyrights are ones that you inherently have some rights to it as soon as you make it. So as soon as you record the episode, as soon as it goes live, you have a limited amount of rights. The main thing is it establishes that you have ownership of it. If you ever go to enforce it, somebody rips it off, they copy it, and that can be, hey, you have a great image or a picture on your website or anything else, and they copy it. In order to ever enforce it, you would need to have it registered. So it's kind of one where you have some inherent rights to it, but in reality, to go and enforce it, to stop somebody to use it, you would have to have a registered copyright. So kind of that nature, there's limited rights. Trademarks are kind of the same thing in the sense that trademarks, if you start out with a name, you start using a business, you start your podcast, whatever the brand is, you have some inherent rights, assuming you don't infringe on somebody else's trademarks. Meaning if somebody else already has the rights to it, you don't have any rights because you're infringing theirs. But if you were the first one to start using that brand for your goods and services, you have rights. But generally what is limiting about those rights is that if you are defined by the geographic location where you offer your goods and services. So as an example, let's say you start the world's best hot dog shop, and I'll just use that as an example. It's a restaurant, hot dog shop, great brand reputation, but you only serve a 10-block radius in Chicago, and that's the only people that know about you because you just serve a local community that eats your hot dogs. Then you have a inherent protection for those 10 blocks. Anything outside of there, somebody else comes along, gets a trademark, registers it federally before you do. They now own everything outside of your area, out of your 10 blocks in the rest of the United States, and you own that 10 blocks. So you have some inherent rights, but they're pretty limited.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, because I had Brian Smith on a while back from UGG founder, and he was talking about how UGG wasn't registered in the United States. So as soon as he got here, he registered UGG. And that's what made it for him because he had that registration, right? So his clothing could say UGG or nobody else's could, right? They say Tug or Jug or whatever. Yeah, huge difference. Even though over in Australia, everything was called UGG, that they never spelled it the same way.
Yep. Yeah. And that is one other thing you highlight is all of the rights we talk about, patents, trademarks, copyrights, it is country by country specific. So interesting kind of, takeaway is I'll ask a question just to see if you know, and then I'll give you the backstory. Do you know why when Apple came out with their Apple Watch, why then they didn't name it iWatch?
No.
You got iPhone, iPad, everything was and then you come out with
wasn't there a watch back in the 80s or something? No, go ahead.
So no, what it was is there was
watch. I'm thinking Swatch. Sorry.
Swatch, but not iWatch. And you would think that, Apple Watch, they already got iPhones, they got iPads. It would have made sense to do iWatch. Problem is they got into is when they got into one of the big markets was China. Somebody else already owned the trademark for iWatch. Apple wasn't the first one to get it. They had an ownership of it. They tried to get it. They couldn't make a deal. And so Apple was basically saying, well, we don't want to split our brands. We don't want to call it iWatch and everywhere else but China and then have to have a different marketing and different thing and cause confusion. So they call it the Apple Watch now. People still often refer to it as the iWatch, but that was why, because just as your friend comes into the U.S. and gets UGG, Apple had the same problem. Even though they're a huge company and have trillions of dollars or billions of dollars in the bank, they still have to play by the same rules, and somebody else already owned it, and so they had to rebrand.
Yeah, it's just amazing. They couldn't buy it.
I'm sure that they probably could have bought it, but it was probably at a price that they didn't want to pay. And the person that owned it said, I can leverage Apple beyond what they were or what is reasonable, and they probably deteriorate. Now they may have since then acquired it or otherwise done something, but at least when they introduced it, that was the reason.
Yeah, well, you never know the reasons until later. But that whole thing about like Bob's, different plumbing or the other plumbing company, it doesn't really need to be unless you're going to be Bob's Big Boy, right? Which you might be too young for that, but that was a restaurant nationwide when I was younger.
I've heard of it, never been to it, but
I've never been to one. I've seen them and I've seen them in movies, but I've never been to one. So,
but what couple things you hit on that are just interesting is one is doing a trademark with your name is very difficult as far as just the use of the word, because basically, unless you're incredibly famous, you're Michael Jordan and everybody knows your name. And when Tom Cruise, and when you hear that name, you only think of one person. For 99.9% of the rest of the people, everybody can use their name. And so you can't stop other people. So you see our name is Miller IP Law. I can't stop other people from using Miller or Law or IP because they're all descriptive. Now I can stop people from using my logo, and I can still protect that. But from that perspective, I can't use somebody else or stop other people that have the same last name of Miller from doing there. So when you get into like a Bob, a lot of times that's difficult unless you reach such a level of infamy that everybody knows that's who it is.
Right. So it's better to come up. That's why a lot of companies make up names, right?
Exactly.
So that they can trademark
Apple,
it.
What does Apple have to do with as consumer electronics? Nothing. Xerox, now everybody tends to use or say, I'm going to make a Xerox, but Xerox had nothing. Kodak had nothing. Pepsi or Coke, all of those are a lot of them. They're getting more different. They're fanciful names that aren't related because it gives you a stronger position to protect them. Right.
Well, I mean, they were a company and they were the first ones to come out with copiers, and then other people came out with copiers, and it became such a normal word that, but you're not. So It's like Coca-Cola, it's only one place is Coca-Cola, right?
Exactly.
Pepsi, that kind of stuff.
Yep. Kleenex, Google it, everything else, all of them start to get, and that is, you didn't ask a question, but it is a problem for a brand when you get so generic that everybody starts to refer to it by that. You can actually lose your trademark. So some of them, really? I think Xerox may have lost their trademarks. Kleenex did. And so for a long time, they're trademarked because everybody started to refer to it not as a product name or to who is selling it, but just as a general what the type of product is. You can actually, it's called genericide, but it becomes so generic that you can lose the rights to your trademark. So you didn't ask, but I thought it was a fun.
Well, no, that just means you're so successful, it doesn't matter anymore, right? Right. You've sold so much product. Everybody thinks everything is Kleenex. Everybody thinks everything is this. And and that's, when you're at that point where, who cares? Do you really need the trademark?
It's a good problem to have. I certainly like to be there myself.
Yeah, I like to be there. But like I have another podcast called Helping the Brave, right? And it has a logo and everything. I couldn't protect Helping the Brave, but I could protect the logo that's designed for it because the other words are too easy to be used in other things, right?
Yeah, and it's in what's called merely descriptive. Basically, if what you're describing is a product or the service you're offering, you can't get a trademark on it. So easiest example is if you were to say, hey, I want to open a fruit stand and I want to sell the world's best apples, best fruit ever. It's the world's best apples. And I'm going to name my fruit stand Apple. You're not going to be able to protect it because when anybody wants to buy the fruit apple, they call it an apple. And so you're not going to be able to stop other people from saying they have an apple stand or they sell apples or anything else. And so you can't just simply describe, when you just simply describe your service you're offering, it's going to make it difficult on the word. Now, you can sell the logo, you can sell something catchy, as you mentioned, but protecting those words, if they're too descriptive, it creates a problem.
Right. And it's all things to think about. Right. When you're starting to see what you need to protect and have that conversation with an attorney and say, this is my business. This is what I'm going to do. Where should I protect it? Or should there be a plan in place that once I hit this part, do I protect it?
I think that if people listening, if there's no other takeaway than that would be the biggest takeaway is to get that strategy and plan in place. Because we talked at the beginning, I get startups always have more things to spend money on than money to spend. It's just part of the startup life, and you're trying to balance that. And so sometimes you're saying, hey, I need to make payroll, or I need to do marketing sales. I need to sell the product before I worry about IP. Absolutely agree with them. Now, what you don't want to do is what happens is you keep kicking the can down the road, keep waiting, keep putting it off until you get to this part where you have a problem to where you can no longer patent your invention because you waited too long, or somebody else already trademarked your brand and now you're having to try and go fight that fight, and it's creating an issue for your business. And so having that strategy, that plan in place such that you're saying, hey, we can't do today, we do need to get this taken care of in 6 months, is the best way to go about doing it. And if you talk with a good attorney that's willing to sit down with you, most of them will do it for free. We'll do a consultation, say, here are the things you could think about. I wouldn't get started today, but you definitely want to get started before X milestone and before you hit this one.
Just so people know, what is the normal cost on average? I'm not saying you know that would be for a general logo trademark, or I'm sure patent can be huge because it's depending on what type of it is and how right? I mean, so is there like an average?
Yeah, I'll walk you through a couple different averages, and we do all of ours on flat fees, and so it makes it easy. And I can even walk you through that or touch on it just slightly,
just so people know what they're looking for, right?
Yeah. So I'll walk through kind of copyrights. You're usually on average, and our flat fee is $350 to file a copyright application. You're usually $300 to $400 is going to be your average if you're using an attorney. I would, just because it makes sure it's done right. But you're about $300 to $400. Trademarks. I mean, if you were to go to, and before I started my firm, I worked for Fortune 100 or top 100 law firm. They were on Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley firms are crazy and expensive. So if you're to say a trademark on average, you're looking on the very low end that I wouldn't recommend. You're going to be $500 to $600. We are usually around $850 or so for a trademark, depending on how many categories or classes you're in. If you want to go crazy Silicon Valley or New York firms, they're $2,000 or $3,000, which I don't know. They don't provide any more value, but that's kind of your range. So if you're looking on average for a trademark to get one filed and to go through the process, if you go through the full process, you're probably $1,200 to $1,500 through the whole process, and to get it filed, you're $800 to $1,000, somewhere in there. Patents, if we're doing a patent, you can do what's called a provisional patent application. That's a lot of times what you hear people say, no, you can just do a cheap application, and you see a whole bunch of advertising online. What that really means is you get a 1-year placeholder that you can be patent pending, explore the idea, save up the money, and then go after a full patent. So there's kind of that delineation. But if you're doing that kind of 1-year placeholder application that's called a provisional, you're usually ranging from, again, on the low end that I wouldn't recommend, $1,000, high end, $3,000, $3,500. We're in the middle of a flat fee of $2,000. Full patent application, that is going to be, again, low end that I wouldn't recommend is $3,500 to $4,000 probably. High end Silicon Valley, New York firms upwards of $8,000 to $10,000. We do it for $6,000. Now those ones are the cost to get an application filed for the patent side. If you're looking for kind of, hey, now if I anticipate what is the full cost to get me through the process, if you're to go somewhere with our firm, you're like $10,000 to $12,000 for the full process. If you're to go to a expensive New York, California firm, you're probably $20,000 to $25,000.
Wow. But when you're saying the low end, I assume you mean online.
Yeah, I mean, online. Everybody's online at some point. So
you know what I mean.
But it's a
something like Zoom or one of those, right?
Yeah, it's that, or it's the solo guy that does a very quick, down and dirty, not a good job that really doesn't give you much protection, but tells you got something filed. It's kind of that, it'd be the same thing as, you feel like when you go to the sleazy used car salesman that, yeah, we're going to get you a great car and it will do all the things that the great car does. And then you drive it off the lot and next week you have a problem. It's kind of that same thing to where, yes, you did buy a car and there was a car salesman that helped you buy it, but it doesn't provide the value you're wanting. And so it's just kind of, if I were to do it kind of like a car, you can get the luxury car that, has a brand name. And that's kind of when you go to the Silicon Valley or the New York firms, they have the nice name. That's a big firm that you can stamp on it. Doesn't really provide any value other than it has the brand reputation. But when the ones I'm talking about in the middle are the ones that do a good job, give you the value, get you what you need, and don't charge an exorbitant rate.
Gotcha. So, I mean, it doesn't, I could see why they wouldn't do it going to I'm close to the Bay Area. So I'm in Modesto. So why they wouldn't go there? Because I can't afford $25,000 right now. I got to make payroll, right? Or in the New York. But if it's only $10,000, that's not so hard to, and that's a full thing. So when I'd watch those shows like the Sharks or whatever, and they say, "Do you have a patent?" It's pending. That just means they filed a 1-page, 2-page thing, right? That's what that means.
Most of the time, they'll usually, I love Shark Tank because or side note, I think I've watched every episode, if not pretty close. Me and my wife love to watch it on Sundays. But yeah, they'll say, I filed a patent, I'm patent pending. And then the very next question, because they're all fairly experienced, is it a provisional or is it a non-provisional? And usually if they say a provisional, which is that one-page placeholder application, they give it very little weight because it's usually very quickly done, doesn't cover a lot, and it hasn't gone through any of the examination process. And so they'll give it more weight than nothing, but not nearly as much as if you actually go or actually done a full patent application, had it well done, and go through that process.
All right. So when they say provisional, that means they just did the 1 page. It doesn't mean anything. When they say the other one, then they know, okay, they're going through the process. It's been reviewed. They actually probably have a really good chance of getting that patent. Right.
Yeah, exactly. It'd be one where it says, hey, we've done the formalities, we're going through the process, we've had it done right, and it gives it impugns or shows a lot better degree of sophistication and seriousness and a better value.
Right. Well, I can just see that right now. So, these are little things that you don't know. You hear all the time. You're like, I don't understand that. I'm not an attorney. Right. But now I got it. So I appreciate that. If people want to reach out to you, get in touch with you and your company, how do they get in touch with you?
Yeah.
Is that the thing on the screen right there that says Devin Miller at M. Miller IP Law?
Sure.
What's your email? What's your email?
So mine is milleripl.com. So IP and then L just for law. So Devin at milleripl.com. They can email me there. That's easy. Couple more ways that they can reach out. One is if they want to do a free consultation, one-on-one strategy meeting. Simple, easy way to do it. Go to strategymeeting.com. That links right to my calendar. You can grab a day and time that works for them. So that's the easiest way. If you want to just talk, have one-on-one, have a conversation, strategymeeting.com. If they want to just find out more about the law firm, what our flat fees are that we ran through, other services, we also have a ton of video content, blog content, audio. We try and hit as many different ways of helping people to understand and come up to speed and learn and get educated. And that's all on our website. They can just go to Law with Miller. It's all one word, lawwithmiller.com. And that gives us right to the website.
Oh, look at that. Get all the information you need up front. See, I always say if you give things away for free, people come to you even more. Right.
Well, I'm happy to give it away for free. No, you don't get it all for free. Don't take me wrong.
No, but I'm just saying you give away here's the information. I mean, you can go, here's a step-by-step process how to file your patent or file this, and they're still not going to do it. They're still going to come to you because they see what is involved. So they want somebody else to do it. Right.
Yep, exactly.
And it's important to have a professional do anything for you, whether that's to deal with the law, whether it's to get a mortgage, because most people think I can just get a mortgage online. You can, but some of those lowest rates are the worst thing you can get and the most expensive things. So you really need somebody who there for you. And that's the same thing with the law and a lot of things in life. You want a professional helping you. Taxes, trusts, you name it, you need a professional. Do I need to keep going?
Probably don't want to go to the garage doctor that's ready or working outside or working in the back of his house.
Yeah, sometimes you don't have enough money. You got to do what you got to do.
That's right.
Anything else you want to add before we go?
No, I think we really covered it. I mean, yeah, I could go through it, hours, and I'd probably
without putting everybody to sleep. Is there anything else you want?
I was gonna say I would go for hours, and nobody else would find it interesting, but I would love it. But no, I think that if people, I would say, get a strategy in place. We're happy to help you get kicked off. Just visit us, or if you're not going to go to us, go to an attorney. And otherwise, I think that just good luck, or wish everybody good luck with their businesses.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. I mean, I think it's very important to know, plans, right? People don't plan, right? But you need to plan if you're starting a company, what you're going to do, when you're going to protect it. And the best thing to do is talk to an attorney so you know those steps and you can plan that out. Get a little bit extra seed money if you need to protect things, right?
Absolutely.
All right. Hey, I want to thank you for joining us today on Inner Edison. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and what Devin shared to us. And if you like what we do here, just follow for more, and we'll see you next week.